It is Thursday, December 12th, 2024 at 6 p.m. We are at the District Service Center in Cottage Grove, Minnesota. We would like is the land of the Mdewakanton Dakota people. Mdewakanton means dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Our first item on the agenda is roll call. Dana?
Brian Clark.
Here.
Sharon Van Leer.
Here.
Eric Tessmer.
Here.
Pat Driscoll.
Here.
Melinda Doles.
Here.
Simi Petnaik.
Here.
Charlotte Wilson. Mariah Oibande.
Here.
Brandon Payne.
Here.
Katie Schwartz.
Here. Okay, 2.0 is Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, 3.0 is approval of amended agenda. We will be adding 11.0 closed session for consideration of student expulsion and 12.0 action on resolution for student expulsion. Can I get a motion?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Simi, seconded by Sharon. Any comments? Any, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 4.0 is comments to the board. We do not have any this evening, so we will move on to 5.0, and that is student district ambassadors, and that will be presented by our superintendent, Julie Nielsen.
Good evening, and thank you. You know it's always an exciting time when our students get to come to the board meetings, and this group is absolutely no exception. I have worked with students a long time, like over 32 years, and in preparing for today's meeting, when I asked each of them, we had our meeting here in the boardroom today, and when I asked them, you know, did you get the graphic organizer to prepare? How's that going? Everyone was done and ready to go. And so you are in for some great comments and some great student voice. We're going to start out this evening with Charlotte. And so Charlotte, I'm going to have you introduce yourself and just talk a little bit about what you enjoy about being a student leader.
So my name is Charlotte Wilson. I'm in 5th grade and I go to Nuevas Fronteras. And I just want to give a quick shout out that I'm really thankful for the fact that my family and my principal, Señora Saucedo, is out there tonight. And when I'm a leader, I feel really proud and thankful for this chance because when I'm a leader, I have the ability to help lots of people, and it makes me really proud to be here because back at my school, I get to know that people know that their ideas are being shared. So, yeah.
All right. Well, and as someone said, I got to see Charlotte this afternoon, and she was on fire this afternoon and so excited. And Charlotte, just so you know, as you came in tonight and some of the adults in the back greeted, they're like, Charlotte's on fire tonight. She's ready to go. We love, love, love the enthusiasm. So next, Charlotte, what is something, we know you have an ambassador group at your school. What is something interesting that's happening at your school? And then what types of things are your ambassadors working on?
So something interesting that's going on right now for my school is technically this just ended, but we do 10 days of giving at our school. I don't know if all the schools in the district do it, but it's where so people get to come and donate toiletries to families who might not have them. And then so we donate them, and it makes me really happy to know that because for 10 days of giving, it's all about giving. Because like when you receive a gift, you feel really happy, right? But to give a gift, it makes you even happier. And something that my student council at my school is working on is, since my school is a Spanish immersion, we receive lots of students that only speak Spanish. And they're new to our country because they come from a Spanish country. So, and a lot of the time, we have our teachers that give them their tours around our school, and we thought that the student ambassadors should help pitch in with that so they can make friends quicker so we can introduce them to their new classmates and their teachers. So, that's that.
So, Charlotte, what is one of your favorite classes or subjects in school, and what do you find motivates you to learn, and what do you enjoy about it?
What motivates me to learn is that I know that if I get it wrong or right, I'll always be supported to try again. And every mistake I make, it's just another chance to try again and to work harder and to know that I'll eventually get it.
And what would you say is your favorite subject area in school?
That's really hard, but I would probably say reading, writing, or math.
So all of it. And finally, Charlotte, what have you learned about the school district representing, being a representative here at the district level? What have you learned about the school district?
I've learned that everyone here is interested in coming in and seeing what we use to learn and try and get things right and to support each other. And if one school might be needing some more tricks, people here will come and share our ideas and different schools' ideas to other schools so they can have more and to understand more on what it means to learn.
And Charlotte, have you met any new friends down here when you've come down to district level? Because we have all of our 16 elementary schools and middle schools and high schools.
I have a lot of friends here, yes.
Fabulous. All right. Thank you, Charlotte. We're going to move on to Mariah. Mariah comes to us from Woodbury Middle School. And as you know, board members, with our older students, they have the option just to prepare kind of their comments. And so Mariah is prepared to share this evening.
So, hello everybody. My name's Mariah. I'm in 8th grade and I go to Woodbury Middle School, as she just said. Something I enjoy most about being a student leader is like helping to improve my school, because like I never knew like how much people like put into this, and to see like how it works is like so interesting and so fun. Something interesting that's happening is in my school is that we're about to do Spirit Week, and I actually participated in like helping choose what to do. So that's gonna be really fun. And one special day we're gonna do is like choose your, like dress up as your type, like dress up as a celebrity crush or something. And yeah. So something special that student ambassadors that we are doing is like creating solutions for our schools. Like very recently, we talked about how like bullying and like that type of stuff is like affecting our schools, and we're like starting to make solutions of how to fix that stuff, because that is affecting students, not only at my school but across the district. And yeah, and making sure that student voices are heard in our school is also very important. So we want to know what motivates them, and personally for me, what motivates me is my parents, because they've always supported me since day one, and myself, because I always want to like build up on what I'm doing. So if I get a B+, I want to make that into A. Positive experience I've had at my school is AVID. It's a college readiness course that you can apply for, and that has been the most funnest thing I've ever took. It's so nice there, and it's always such a like supportive environment, so I'm so happy I signed up for that. And something I would want to create like AVID is like something that includes pre-med, because I know a lot of students and a lot of my friends are interested in that stuff, but it's not really available to us. But I would love to do something like that, because it's so interesting to see how others and how their body works. And here, not only has the district meetings been so fun, but also I've loved to see how it's been working and how they have impacted our school so much. Like as a little kid, I didn't know, like I thought it was all unicorns and rainbows, but like seeing how everyone has worked so hard to impact our school is like so crazy. And a highlight of our school is like meeting new people I would never met otherwise, because like 2,000 or 20,000 people, I'm not gonna see them on the street every day. But yeah, thank you guys.
Mariah, I'm impressed. I was going to ask her, do you remember how many students? And she started at 2,000, and she's like, that's a little bit low. I'm going 20,000. And so We did talk about, so many times from the student perspective, it's just about their school and the number in their school. So you're right, 20,000. And I think board members, you're aware that when we bus the students from various schools, the first time they come in, they're quiet, they act like they don't know each other. And now we're already on the second meeting and they're starting to talk, they know each other, they go around and, connect with each other. So the only thing that stopped them from talking this morning when they came in was the cold. They said they were frozen, but outside of that, they did warm up. So Brandon, we're going to close with you. Brandon is from Eastridge High School.
Hi, I'm Brandon Payne. I'm from Eastridge High School. I'd first like to thank the entire school board and Ms. Nielsen for having me. It's a really fun experience to be here. I've really enjoyed being a district ambassador for the past less than a year, where I get to come here every month and talk with other high school students and elementary students and middle school students about issues in our school and how to improve experiences at school for all of our students, and then getting to bring home information to friends and other classmates. That's along with being a district ambassador, I'm also part of our student cabinet, which I really enjoy because I get to talk about issues specifically in our school. And we've recently been talking about the new phone policy that's statewide, as long as the expansion of Eastridge, which I'm really excited to see, and as long as it develops. A positive experience from my school is being a part of the PLTW Project Lead the Way engineering program. This is my third year doing it, and I'm right now taking engineering development and design, or capstone, and I get to work with a partner and a 3M engineer as we develop a solution to fires caused by lithium-ion batteries in electric cars. It's really cool to, find a solution to an advanced topic and having that experience. And I'd really like to see that PLTW opportunity in other high schools, because I know that both Woodbury and Park don't nearly have as much opportunities as us. And it'd be nice to see that, because I feel like having the opportunity to explore a career before entering college is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. One thing that is great to observe as the students come together and as they get to know each other, I know today Charlotte was introduced to Mariah, and Mariah was introduced to Charlotte, but as the meeting closed, I noticed something. Charlotte went up to Mariah and shook her hand and said, I'll see you tonight. And so really, when we think about leadership, part of leadership is communication. And so what the students are learning is not only are younger students learning to look up to our older students, but our older students are learning that empathy and compassion of working with the wiggles and the squirms and the distractions sometimes, and just watching all of the students together. Today they worked in mixed groups as they were having conversations, and it was just a true joy to watch how our olders were taking our youngers under their wings and helping them, listening to them, trying to paraphrase what they were saying. But we just are so pleased to have representation from across the district as we do our work. They are very attentive, they are very kind to each other, and this year we made the decision to have all of them in person. We just found that they were going to be more valuable if the kids could come down here to District Service Center and interact. So Charlotte, Mariah, and Brandon, we say thank you to you. They're so excited. I don't know if they were 2 hours excited though. So for board members and those viewing at home, once we get done with the information items, we will dismiss our students so they can get some sleep. Or study for their ACT, Brandon, because we do have school tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, or all three of you, sorry, I said both. We'll move on to 6.0, consent items. All consent items are considered routine and non-controversial by the school board and will be approved by a single motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items. Prior to the meeting, board members did have the opportunity to review each of these items and could have requested that any of them be moved to an action item for individual consideration. That did not happen this evening, so can I get a motion to approve?
Second.
Motion by Sharon, seconded by Eric. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. On to 7.0, and that is our information items. 7.1 is Park and Eastridge High School construction update, and that will be introduced by Tyrone Brookins, Assistant Superintendent.
Sure, Schwartz, school board members, Superintendent Nielsen, and student ambassadors. We are here this evening to provide an update on construction for our two of our three high schools, Eastridge High School and Park High School. Facilitating this conversation would be Mark DuBois from Coma Architects, And in the audience, we have both principals, Todd Herber and Jim Smokovich, representing the high schools. We also have Dan Hines, the Assistant Director for Engineering and Infrastructure, and we have Kyle Euchre, who's here for serving as the Director of Facilities, and they will be able to answer any questions that may come up from the presentation. As a reminder, we passed a referendum a year ago now. 2 questions related to the bond. Question 1 was around safety and security, and we have commenced those projects. And so you'll hear an update for 2 of those projects from that group. And then question 2 was more around our elementary schools, and that will commence in January. So that conversation will begin to pick up with question 2 later in January. As we go into the construction planning phase, you're going to see different renderings and drawings for these 2 high schools. I bring your attention that we have been meeting with school personnel, leadership teams, and I would say different departments from the high schools to provide input into these designs. And so what you see is the work that has culminated from multiple meetings with those groups. This here is a graphic that we've shown at every board meeting, and this is our planning that goes from 2024 all the way to 2027. As you can see, we are closing out 2024 with the design and planning phase for those 7 projects that you saw in question 1. And now we're going into January 2025, and you'll see some pickup with those elementary schools. That said, I'm going to turn the mic over to Mark, and he's going to give you an update.
Hey, good evening. Thank you all for inviting me back to give another update on Eastridge and Park High School. The last time we looked at this was July, and I checked, and it was about 75 degrees. So a lot has changed from then to now. But in the main, the plans, the overall schemes, the concepts, and the scope has not changed dramatically. We'll take some time and walk through. Since then, we've been spending a lot of time in the detailing phase of the design of both projects to get the ideas onto paper so that the contractors can actually build it and turn it into a reality. And that's the exciting part, is that we're moving forward towards that. The Eastridge project has already been bid out, and the bids have come in, and initially has been favorable. The Park High School project is coming down to the end of the line, and those will be put out to bid in January. So that's kind of the overall time frame. And at this point, I will walk through some of the highlights of the project, Eastridge and then Park, and we'll stop for any questions in between the two. Quickly reminder of Eastridge and the scope that the referendum outlined and we've been designing towards, the addition of classroom space to serve an additional 600 students, both science and general classrooms and special ed classrooms. We've also been providing a space for the growing online learning students as well. An expansion of the CTE wing, particularly the construction program. We're also expanding the cafeteria and expanding the kitchen and reconfiguring the existing kitchen to serve the additional students that are coming. And we've also been looking at reconfiguration of the entry, the drive, the drop-off, the pickup, some of the parking to improve that traffic flow as well. This is an image of the overall site, and we will get into the details of that later on, but everything in color is a part of the site that's being touched. So the entry, the staff parking, student parking, and the CTE addition on the north. The 2 floor levels are obviously being added onto and remodeled. The spaces in color are the spaces that are being either remodeled or added onto. Everything in gray is the existing facility that's not being remodeled as part of this project. Again, we'll get into the details of that, this being the 2nd floor plan. We have been working on some of the finishes, color palettes, materials for the addition and the remodel, with the intent of kind of matching primarily what the existing facility has. It's not that old, obviously, and we wanted the additions and the new spaces to flow and read as if they were extensions of the original construction. The new classroom addition will be the purple pod. I'll get into some of the more specifics with some of these plans. So this is an enlarged portion of the plan showing on the right-hand side or on the east is the expansion of the cafeteria and the relocation of the activities entrance that's currently in that location that will increase the capacity of the cafeteria to around 750 students per lunch period. Also, the existing kitchen at the top in blue will be reconfigured to allow a better traffic flow. And we now will create 2 separate serving areas, one near the new entry and then obviously the existing. These are some of the renderings of what the new cafeteria expansion will look like. You can see we're using the same materials, color palettes, and so in a way, this is just an extension and expansion towards the east. Another series of views, this being on the right-hand side is where the secondary kitchen and server area will be with the activity center entrance as it sits today. Second floor, there'll be a bit of a bridge or a link that connects the existing second floor to the new addition. We'll also be putting together a new set of bathrooms that will be easily supervisable from the cafeteria itself. I also mentioned there's the Career and Technical Education, CTE expansion. That will be on the west side of the existing CTE wing. It will be primarily an expansion to expand the program into construction and larger construction beyond small woodworking. Again, with the idea of providing more experience and preparation for trades after graduation. It will be an expansion of about 3,000 square feet, and it will serve both the woods and the metals shop, depending on which is needed. Again, a rendering of what that space will start to look like. You can see some of the pods, I guess we would call them. They're the ability to sort of frame up some construction and apply different trades like electrical, plumbing, drywall, those sorts of things that would be needed in the trades. As I mentioned, obviously, one of the main goals was to expand student capacity. The building was designed and built for about 1,700. This addition will expand the capacity to about 2,300. And again, it's a 2-story addition combining science in the pink and then general education and special education in the brown and green. Each of those components will have collaborative learning areas outside in kind of student commons, and this being the second floor. This is a rendering, kind of a shot from the sky of the addition that will be built kind of around the black box theater and connect up towards the new cafeteria addition. This is a rendering of one of the new science rooms with some fixed casework, those octagonal workstations, lab stations, and then flexible seating and furniture in the middle that can be used either for a lecture or can be moved around to do group work. This is an image of one of the collaborative areas where students can come together for small groups work or individual work. if they're not within the classroom. Some of the other renovations that will be happening, the special ed wing will, in the lower gold pod, will be getting a new DCD kitchen, classroom, restroom, and renovated spaces. And as I mentioned, the online learning student population has continued to grow, and so we're going to provide a special space for them in the balcony area, second floor area that kind of overlooks the existing cafeteria. I mentioned that we're also trying to improve the site as part of this, and as I think we've looked at before, but one of the main goals is to improve the traffic flow, particularly of parents coming in to drop off or coming in to pick up. And so the reconfiguration of the entry and drive sequence off Hargis will provide significantly more stacking for cars as they come in the mornings or the afternoons and get them off Hargis. These are some of the exterior renderings. We saw some preliminary ones back in July, but we've been refining the design. The activities entrance, this is the new activities entrance, which is will be pulled further east from where it is now. On the left-hand side, you can see the beginning of the two-story classroom wing that connects to it. And then we're going to create this new plaza outside to connect from the student parking lot. There'll also be some terraced areas where students can sit or wait or even have an outdoor class. As I mentioned, the Eastridge project the bids have already been taken. They're being reviewed at the moment with the intention of award in January. And the construction is intended to begin at spring break. So by March, the contractors will start to mobilize on site and begin with the demolition of the existing activities entrance and put up temporary walls and temporary exits. And then they will start to build the classroom addition on the south, moving towards the north. And by the time school is out in June, they will take over that whole area and the activities entrance will be rerouted. In addition, in the summer, they will start the construction of the CTE wing on the north, and the project will be tied up and complete by August of 2026. So that's a nutshell of Eastridge. Are there any questions or comments or thoughts before we move on to Park?
Hi, Mark. I have a few questions.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's a shock. So the new cafeteria is going to expand outside where the gym currently is that correct? Like on that second floor of the gym, is that correct?
No, it's going to move eastward. I don't know if this is the best image, but so if you can see that diagram, the little, maybe I should find a better one. There's an existing entry. Oops. So basically where this gray area, I don't know if I can highlight this. Everything in blue on the right in that diagram is new. So
It's new,
on
okay.
the left edge of that blue block is the existing entry
Okay.
to the activity center. So basically everything will be built out towards the east, towards the parking lot. And then, as we looked at in this image, so basically everything you're seeing in this is new, and you're looking towards the east, towards the parking lot.
Oh, okay, so this is moved out then from where the current, okay,
Correct.
okay.
You're in essence, in this image, you're in
Oh, okay.
essence standing where the activities entrance is now.
Okay, and then how many more seats does this end up adding for kids to, or how many kids can eat now, like during A lunch, B lunch, C lunch?
I think that right now it serves about 600, if I'm looking at Jim to verify that. There's 3 lunch periods. And this addition will increase it to as much as 800 per lunch.
Okay.
They may not all fill up at the beginning, but part of what we're doing, obviously, with the kitchen and the cafeteria is to expand for any future expansion that would happen even beyond this project, so
Okay.
that we don't have to do it again.
And then, can you remind me again why we have the split kitchens? Why one kitchen is here and one is
Sure.
over here?
So after working with nutrition services quite a bit, it was, right now, obviously, if you're familiar with the building, it's pretty tight going through lunch, right? I'm looking at Brandon. And so one of the things that we discussed and we understood was to actually separate based on the food that each is getting. They don't all take the same food or take the same meals. So by creating a remote kitchen, we call it, that can be for one type of meal service, while the main kitchen can remain the main meal service. So as you're coming in as a student, you're making the choice, what am I coming to eat today? And you would go to either one or the other.
Okay, so like à la carte or doubles will be over here, and then
Yes.
regular meal will be over there, okay.
That's right. So in this plan, again, maybe a little hard to see, but on the left-hand side of the existing kitchen is where the à la carte will be. So you come directly in for that. If you're going for the main meal, you go through the main serving, and then if you're going for the kind of express meal, you go to the remote kitchen near the new entry. So from a traffic flow and stacking of students, it was deemed that it would be better to sort of spread them out.
Okay. And then, these questions actually might be for you, Jim. With the online learning section, is that meant for kids who have like one period or like one-off online classes? Or is that, the idea is that kids who are doing SoWashCo online can come there, but if they're boundaried for Eastridge?
Yes, so some students have one online, or they may have three online, and currently we're asking them to go to the media center. Our media center is at times 180 to 200 students right now, because of the capacity of that center was never intended for that. So this space that we're seeing here is the old Avid rooms upstairs, and so we will have the opportunity to have a space that is located in one spot where they will have different seating options and studying options and online options, and so that we don't have them, and that will free up the media center again to become a media center again. And have a centrally located spot. And right now, and some of you may have students, and Brandon can attest, we have students trying to find online space all over. The library is jam-packed, and this is one of my most exciting things within the build, is to have that designated space, especially with the amount of online that is occurring. And kids most kids don't leave the building when they take online courses. Some do, but they stay and they need a space, and this will accommodate that in the future.
And so this is closed off then to like the hallway or whatever, but when it says open to below, is that like open air to below, or is there just is there a window so they can look below?
Yeah, there are windows overlooking the cafeteria back there, am I correct? And what we're doing is we're taking out an original Avid wall that's right here. So that wall is removed, and it provides more space out into that hallway and opens that space up. But students will still travel through there during passing time.
Okay.
So we still have, the doors can be secured on or closed so that once they're in there, it's a quieter spot, and so on and so forth. But it is also that movement between the second floor from the old part of the building to the new part of the building, because as Mark mentioned, there's a bridge that goes to second floor in the new wing.
Okay. And then my last question is, the collaborative spaces that you're designing, do they exist in East Ridge now?
Yes, so each of the original design pods were outfitted for collaborative spaces, and this one will pretty much mimic, a little bit different and maybe different shape and size and longer, but it's the same concept. And then I'm starting to try to creatively update the current pods that we have to match. So we actually have a sample pod coming here, probably spring break in Lower Green. The building's now 15 years old, and the things wear out quickly, and we're a hodgepodge of different things in each pod to accommodate student use. And so we're trying to remodel that as I can, and then the new setup will be very similar but with an increase in technology so that students can hook their Chromebooks in and have a group meeting and have a display on the wall. And there is it still the enclosed? We also have the glass enclosed meeting area for students and or teachers that is right in the pod, but it provides an opportunity for a group of students with their teacher to go into a more secure, quieter area to have a conversation or a meeting. So it's going to be really nice and unique, similar, and updated at the same time. So,
Brandon, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Are you a junior or senior? Or
I'm a junior.
You're a junior? Oh yeah, if you're taking the ACT Saturday, you would be. Good luck. If you're, how do you use like the collaborative spaces, or how do you see them being used in the school?
A lot of the time, the collaborative space is used through teachers. Teachers request to use the space during hours so that we can go out there and use the space to maybe be a little bit more separated and work in groups, and then use the space to just anything that's going on in our classroom.
Okay. Does the collaborative space get used during wind time, or is that in wind time you're supposed to be in a classroom? Or sorry, sorry, my children go to Woodbury, so.
Wind time, Woodbury, R&R, Raptor. No, I forgot the question.
Thank you for translating. Are those collaborative spaces used during R&R time? Or
There actually is some R&R spots. There's also an R&R that happens down in the cafeteria right now. Have you gone to any R&Rs that are not in a classroom?
I went to the cafeteria for like the PSAT like preparation stuff with counselors.
Okay. And then I know we have an English teacher down there right now too. But yeah, we have classroom use. We're using some of the pods just because there is a lack of space. We have traveling teachers, a lot of them right now. Mm-hmm. And once we're done, we'll have the opportunity to not have a teacher on a cart for at least for a few years, right?
And then actually I lied when I said that was my last question. So this is actually for you, Mark. On the plaza, is the accessible entry then going to be alongside the building, or, because I see that when you come from the parking lot, it's all stairs?
Yep. So in this view, I'm not sure if there's a better view of it. On the left-hand side is where the classroom, two-story classroom addition is, and right along the edge of that will be a sloped walkway
Okay,
to
where it
come
says,
up.
where it has Eastridge Raptors?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So that'll be the accessible path up to that entry now.
Okay, and then the materials that we're putting in, typically how long do we expect those to, I mean, I live with children, I know how nicely they treat my stuff. So how long do we expect them to last in this building?
You mean the
Like
interior
the
finishes
interior,
and
like the
such?
terrazzo and whatever, all
Yeah.
the finishings?
Yes. Well, obviously, they vary based on what they are. The terrazzo is going to last forever. Well, not forever, but, you know,
Right.
beyond us. The carpet and such is probably 10 to 15 years. Tile is probably 20 or probably more. Often what happens with tile is people say, this is kind of outdated, and it's not so much that it's worn out.
Oh, it's not past its use, it's
just people want to
It's like
change
house
the
hunters.
aesthetic
Okay.
of it, so, yep.
And so, Chris, I know, this is very exciting. So then are like the replacement of the fixtures and stuff, like Jim was talking about creatively matching or whatever, is that through LTFM then, or is that?
So typically, Jim is actually leveraging his capital dollars, so we assign a specific portion of our operating capital funds to the school sites. And I know we worked together just a few weeks ago, kind of had a meeting to say, hey, how can we do this? LTFM typically can't go for those types of things. It's those longer-term assets typically.
Now I swear I'm done. Thank you.
Great.
I have a question.
Okay.
Simi took most of them, but.
That's all right.
So, as you know, I'm an East Ridge parent, so I'm just trying to look at the models and visualize this. So this new interior universal restroom area, is that going to be in replace of the two existing ones on both sides of the loft stage, or will those still be there as well?
No, we're not removing anything. We'll be adding. I was gonna
adding more
see if I could
restrooms.
get to. So this is a rendering of it as you're standing in the universal restroom area and looking back towards the cafeteria. As part of the whole intention is that there's a greater visibility on it so that there's safety and security included in that. But from a plan perspective, it doesn't quite show up, but on the very bottom right, it just says restroom there. So that will be individual restroom rooms, and there will also be one room that has a adult changing station table that's in there. That's part of the new code requirements for any kind of new assembly space. So those will be in addition to serve what additional students or activities are going on in there. Yep.
Thank you.
One thing I forgot to mention, and maybe we mentioned it before, but was the classroom addition, the general education spaces. So basically the green and the brown, and then the collaborative area with the restrooms within it, that will be a 2-story storm shelter. I think I mentioned that before, but that's part of the code requirements, again, that have triggered now with the additional square footage and student count. But so that will also serve as a storm shelter for 2,800 or 2,900 people, so that in the event that something comes, people can enter that building and be safe.
I just have one question about that online space. Are we going to have a lot of plugs in the online space?
Yes. Yes. Charging and also for, it's a little hard to see here, but there's going to be mobile technology that will be connected in as well. So yes, we've been adding that to the existing, as Jim mentioned, there are some existing walls that will remain, and they have a lot of power to them already, but we'll be adding in some in selected spaces as well. Yep.
Just having a student who never charges his Chromebook. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yes.
So the student capacity, how much is that increasing?
We are increasing the building capacity from 1,700 to 2,300, so 600. Now, Jim can tell you the exact numbers, but our understanding is that currently there's about 2,100 students in the building. So we're increasing to catch up and then to add a little bit more, so that 2,300 is the goal at this point.
Okay, so the shelters would be for all the students and the teachers that.
Exactly. That's where that 28 or 2,900 is, that if this building were to expand even to 2,500 students, which is future potential, not sure, but even at that point, we wouldn't need to add on to this. It's designed for that capacity. Yep.
That's great.
Actually, sorry. I should just never promise that it's my last question. So when you just mentioned that there's potential, you also had mentioned with the cafeteria that it's sort of more than 2,300 students worth of capacity.
Right.
So is the design that is put in place now, like I know we said that this would be kind of a bolt-on addition from when East Ridge was originally designed. Does this also accommodate like another bolt-on addition kind of thing?
There would still be the capacity for one. In essence, the initial, I'll get to the overall plan, but the original thought was that there would be a 4th identical pod put on the south southwest portion of the site. After a lot of conversations and design meetings and such, we decided that this location would actually be better, a little more central for the science rooms especially. But that doesn't preclude the future expansion to that fourth, which would then become a fifth pod if we so desired in the future.
Okay.
Yep. But without having to expand kitchen, cafeteria, or storm shelter. Yep. So this is kind of setting it up for a potential future if that were to come.
If needed. Okay,
Yep.
perfect. Thank you. Now I swear I'm done.
Okay. Great. Should we move on to Park High School? Okay, Park High School, again, the scope from the referendum briefly was not student capacity expansion, but improvement of existing facilities, including a new kitchen, cafeteria, which is the storm shelter, to basically create something new that has been needed for a long time. The existing kitchen and cafeteria is literally the existing 1965 facility. We're expanding the CTE again at Park to provide more opportunities for the construction trades. And we are creating a more consolidated, safe, secure entry and front office suite that we will look at on the south. We're also, one of the big changes is to reroute traffic, parent traffic, pickup and drop off to the north side of the site. So there'll be a second secure entry on the north side that we'll look at as well. Interior remodel of CTE, science, art, business, student services, special ed, so throughout the existing building. Again, just a nod to the past and into the future. So in 1965, this mural was put up in the building. It's still there. And we actually have taken some design inspiration from that mural and some of the aesthetics of it, trying to pull that into the future. In 2022, we did a media center remodel, and that you will see some of the elements of that into this upcoming edition. Again, an overall site that we'll look at in a little more detail, but we are expanding and relocating soccer fields, football practice fields. We are reworking, repaving student and staff parking lots. We're creating this new ring road throughout the north side that we'll get into in detail. Again, everything in color is a space that will be either renovated or added onto. The gray is existing, not touched. Again, a color palette and material palette. One of the big emphases that we wanted to achieve in this project, to the best of our abilities, was to provide a more welcoming feel aesthetically, materials, colors, from the moving away from the 1965 aesthetic. So as I mentioned, one of the first things, as you're aware, if you're familiar with Park, on the south side of the building is where visitors come, and we wanted to provide a little more secure entryway than what's there now. So we're sort of developing, I would say, at least 3 levels of security. One is the existing vestibule. Then there will be a secure kind of greeting commons area, and then a secure front office. So if you're familiar with the plan at all, that sort of angular piece on the south is the existing lecture hall, and the plan is to remove the risers, make a flat floor, and then move the front offices into that space so that it's closer to the front entry and provides a more secure path. We'll also be moving the nurse to that existing multipurpose room that is highlighted in light blue. On the north side, as I mentioned, this view is a little bit out of context perhaps. It'll make more sense later. But on the north side, we'll be creating a secure vestibule entry into the new cafeteria and activities entryway. Relocating and consolidating the student support facility or spaces was important in this project. We have sort of tried to organize the spaces along what we're calling the main street, which is a north-south hallway that's being created to connect the south entry to the new north entry in the cafeteria. And along that main street is where students will find support services, counselor, psychologist, and the like. In purple is what you're seeing around a courtyard, the student services. Also, this in green will be the relocated new inclusion center. As I mentioned, one of the main goals to achieve is the new kitchen and cafeteria, the kitchen being the orange and the cafeteria being the yellow. Cafeteria will seat roughly 750, 800 students. It's broken up into two components. The lower piece in yellow is kind of a lower ceiling, a little more intimate space for students that are preferring to be in that kind of environment as opposed to the large. On the north side, that will be a higher ceiling, and we'll see some renderings of that. Again, the kitchen and servery is broken into actually three components. There's sort of a main servery, a secondary servery, and then on the south side is where the a la carte sits. And so again, that idea of dispersing the students so that there's not so much time going through lines. Some renderings of the cafeteria. The intention is to, again, this will be the storm shelter as well, but we do have some very large windows that are storm resistant, but will also provide a lot of natural light. We are trying to use some of these arcs and circular forms to try to break up some of the very rectilinear 1965 aesthetic and forms that are there. Again, another image of the cafeteria. Those are large light fixtures, if you're wondering.
There's sort of what did you say?
Large light fixtures, if you're wondering. This is the south end of what we're calling Main Street. So this is, in essence, the existing cafeteria entry on the south side, if you can picture that. When you go through the student commons, there's a main east-west hallway, and then there's a north-south hallway that heads into the cafeteria. So this is in that location, but it's going to connect the south to the north. This is sitting at the sort of the hub or the northern connection of that main street. And what you're looking at in the middle is what would be the new school store with glass. Again, turning the corner to get towards the cafeteria. Some of the areas of renovation within the classroom, as I mentioned, I won't go into much detail with it, but again, we're renovating science, biology, chemistry, adding a chemistry space, earth and space. We're also renovating and reconfiguring art spaces in the light blue. Also, the CTE is in orange. That will be renovated. The expansion to the CTE being on the north end of what is currently small engines, but we're going to turn that into wood and construction. We're expanding and renovating the business classrooms, which will be tied to the school store. We're renovating the fax rooms to create a new modern fax lab. This is a rendering of one of the science rooms that will be renovated, again, splitting between lab in the back and lecture in the front, but all of the furniture is flexible and can be relocated to serve different educational needs. This is a rendering of that expanded CTE woods and construction lab, again showing the ability to build large pieces and gain real-world construction experience in high school. This is an image of the online learning space that will also double as a professional development kind of large meeting room with technology. And again, as with Eastridge, we are going to be creating a new exterior plaza on the north side. So this is the cafeteria in the straight ahead, and then the new entry, north entry, is where the signage and the doors are. So there'll be outdoor seating, and this will be the entry, this sort of being an overhead shot that gives you an idea of the cafeteria on the right, the new entry on the top, the existing gymnastics gymnasium on the left. As I mentioned, one of the other major factors or pieces of this project is the reconfiguration of the entry sequence for parents and the separation of parents from buses and visitors. So as you know, everybody comes in on the south side now, and so what we're doing is trying to remove congestion along 80th by separating out traffic so that it's only buses and visitors that come on the south side, and then parents that are dropping off or picking up are actually entering over by Crestview and then coming up through and around on the north side and then out onto Ideal. Construction phasing, this project will be a 3-year project. Todd, I'm looking at Todd. And, but this will also begin in the spring. The intention is to start to excavate as soon as the weather permits on the north side to start to do foundations, footings, utilities, and that will continue through the summer. There will be, this is a color-coded map that I won't go through in detail, but you can see that each one of those colors indicates kind of a different phase within the building for over time from the spring of 2025 all the way through the summer of 2027. As I mentioned, this project is started a little bit later and is finishing up. We will be sending the drawings out for bid at the end of January, bids taken in March, and then approval and construction in April. Any questions about Park?
I have one.
Okay.
Where in the building is the online space?
Okay, good question. I probably blitzed through that quickly. See if I can find the plan. So those were the images. And actually where it will be, is that? If I can get to the plan.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so it's on the north side of this image. So where that sits, probably just need to get to the overall floor plan. It will be in a portion of the existing cafeteria. So that sort of the western wing of the cafeteria, if you can picture that, there's a courtyard in the middle of the building with a greenhouse. So just south of that, so that online learning will have windows that face into that courtyard, and then you would be able to see the greenhouse. So it's pretty much dead center in the building, if you can picture that. It's that kind of dark green highlighted area, if you can see that in the middle of the building. Is that
So how many seats are we allocating to online learning, I guess, at either of the high schools?
Yeah, I think at Eastridge we've been thinking around 150, and I think at Park it's maybe around 100
Okay.
plus. obviously they're fluctuating based on the year, but I think we're seeing growth at all the high schools of the online, so.
And is that in line, Todd, with about how many kids per hour are doing online classes? Or is that more than how many kids are doing online classes right now per hour?
Currently, we'll have more capacity than what we have need for at this time, so we'll be able to
We
accommodate
can grow
future
into
growth.
that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then will we have a variety of like seating? Because I know not everyone's sitting in a chair and whatever.
There'll be some variety of seating. We're trying to make some of the seating mobile because this will also double as, without having a lecture hall, this is where we'll also have staff meetings. And so as you kind of look at that green blob, you'll see two little white areas kind of indent. Yeah. So that will work as a hallway during the day. And then you can see it's right across from the opening from the media center, so we'll have some passive supervision from our media clerks to help support that. Okay. And so then all that seating will be set up, but then we'll be able, there's a storage room adjacent to that where we'll have additional seating we can pull out for bigger staff meetings and also put away so that we can set things up for online learning. And then along the south wall of that online learning, there will be like 3 of these large type wall monitors so that we can have staff presentations and things like that. And depending on how things work out, it could also expand for, I know Avid likes to get out and do some big presentations as well with their kids. So it'll allow for some flexibility. And having it right by the media center, it gives that ebb and flow of being able to use that space.
Is the removal of the lecture hall, what is your lecture? I mean, I've only been in there in the lecture hall a couple times. Like, what is it typically used much now or not really? Or
Intermittently.
Intermittently,
So
okay.
I would say it's a space that's, it's a handy space and usable space, but it is used infrequently.
Okay.
And so it's something we can live without because we can do something different.
So I know in the Eastridge pictures, there were a lot of the new bathrooms. Is there only the one at
Yes.
Park that's going to be the open, that's by the cafeteria? There won't be any additional?
Yes, that's correct.
There's only one new one at Eastridge, too.
I've just learned the more colors, I think it's going to mean the bigger mess. And I think we've really tried to prepare our staff for that. I think we have to remember that while this construction and while we're talking about phasing, we're going to have students in schools. Activities are going to continue. And so all of that is going to be quite the science to make all of that happen. And so we know that in order to start renovations at Woodbury and Park, we have to add those cafeterias, then renovate where the cafeterias were, and then all of the other spaces. And so the first phasing might be okay, adding the cafeteria because there's no one there yet, but those next phases are going to be much more complex as students and staff are moving about in the space.
So all of the like new plaza renderings, that's all on the north side, like toward the neighborhood, correct? And so on the football field, well, yeah. Since I don't go on the football field, I think of the street behind it. But yes, so the south side, is there going to be any exterior improvements at all?
No.
Okay.
Or
I would say because that lecture hall is turning into the main offices, we're going to be adding windows for the offices on that south wall of the existing lecture hall, if you can picture that. So that would be the improvement and the change you'll see on the south side.
Okay. And so then students, so you've got the greeter then at the back of the building and then also the greeter at the front of the building. So is this going to be the case that when school is out, or when school is in, but it's not when the typical time when kids arrive, that there will be a greeter at the back, or is that when kids will get dropped off at the front?
So what this will allow for us to do is, especially in the morning and the afternoon, is that's when most of our congestion is. Mm-hmm. And both the north and south entrance are about the same from the student parking lot. So we'll work out our procedures if during the day kids are continuing through the main entrance during the school hours. The big aspect that will really help us out a lot for congestion will be having that north entrance to really alleviate the traffic in the afternoon.
And so I think I've parked behind Park before. Is this going to take away some of that parking?
When the project is finished, we will actually have a net gain of 50 spaces.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's exciting.
How
do we, I know Julie, you were talking about it going on when school's in session. How do we anticipate the noise level and how much that's going to affect the student learning?
Mark and I have had some conversations, and we're trying to be as strategic as we can to have as many of our classroom renovations occur during the summer months. And for like our student services and our administrative offices, to try and free up the lecture hall space earlier so we can use that as a flex space while we're going through some of the renovations. So it's easier to move adults than it is to move classrooms, especially when you see all the classrooms are lab-based. So we're really trying to work those to hopefully be managed during the summer.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So before Katie does the next agenda item, I'm watching the time and I'm watching our students. And so students, I know you loved seeing all those pictures of construction. And I don't know if you're as excited as when you came in, but you are okay to be dismissed right now and finish your studies and get to bed because school is tomorrow. Thank you so much, Brendan, Mariah, and Charlotte. We appreciate you coming tonight.
Okay, we will move on to 7.2, and that is our 2023-24 Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness and Achievement and Integration Updates. That will be introduced by Kelly Jansen, Assistant Superintendent.
All right. Good evening, Chair Schwartz, Board Members, Superintendent Nielsen, and I was going to say student ambassador representatives, but I'm here to introduce the annual report on SoWashCo Schools' progress toward the goals set forth in the Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness, or CACR, and the Achievement Integration Plan. The information shared this evening is a reflection of the 23-24 school year and will be given by Dr. Mautau Jacobson, Director of Program Evaluation, Research, and Assessment, or PARA, and Mr. James McGee, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, or DEI. We will pause after each of the sections so that we can entertain any questions that you have. The role of the board in this statute requirement is to hear details about progress toward the goals set forth in our CACR and A&I plans, which we are here to provide tonight. You see that on the left-hand side. And part of the statute requires strategies developed to achieve these goals. In the past, we found that when we combined these presentations, it was just a lot of information. And so you can see that we have moved those strategies to achieve the goals into those curriculum reports. And we had our literacy curriculum report in October. In January, we'll have our math report. And then in April, we'll have our science report. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Jacobson to start with CACR.
Good evening. So I'm going to walk us through the Comprehensive Achievement and Civic Readiness Report, which is formerly known as the World's Best Workforce. So this is a mandated report that school districts have to do every year. The legislation outlines several prescribed areas, and school districts get to decide what the measures and the goals are, and we report on it every year. A little background on our goals and measures. Many of them are long-term, spanning across 9 years. So the baseline year was the 2016-17 school year, and the end year is this year, 24-25. Our yearly goals were established by looking at the difference from that baseline to the end year, and every year there's an equal amount of increase in percentage points to meet that end year goal. And then we also had a change in our kindergarten readiness measures because we implemented the ARC elementary literacy curriculum, which came with a separate, with its own assessment. There are some additional changes to the reporting. So last year, they eliminated the goal, all students in 3rd grade achieving grade level literacy, and that was a result of the READ Act, which states that all students should be reading at grade level. This year, in addition to the new name, there's a different submission process. The reporting is submitted with the ESSA financial report. The deadline for that was 2 weeks earlier than usual. And then also there's a new goal this year, preparing students to be lifelong learners. So we're required to define that measure this year and have a baseline measure to report on next year. This table outlines the CACR measures with our strategic directions, and it really just illustrates that the CACR is embedded in our strategic plan. So before I go into the data, I do just want to encourage you all to keep in mind that the CACR measures are not a complete picture of the student experience. The measures look at one point in time on one assessment. So for each area, you're going to see a table with these 4 columns. The first is going to list out our measure and any long-term goals that are identified. That second column is going to be our yearly goal. And then that third column is our district result. And that fourth column is the result statewide. I'm not going to touch on that fourth column, but it's there for some context. So the first area is all students ready for school. And here we have 2 measures. The first measure is the percentage of 3-year-old early childhood screenings. Our goal this year was to have 40.1% of screenings be that of 3-year-olds. We did meet that goal, where 47.2% of our early childhood screenings were completed with 3-year-old children. The second measure is the percentage of kindergarten students reading at grade level by the end of the school year on the ERLA or the ANEAL, which is the assessment that is tied with the ARC reading or the ARC curriculum. And then the ANEAL is the Spanish version of the ERLA, which is done at the Spanish Immersion School. So this year, the goal was that 71.8% of kindergarten students would be reading at grade level by the end of the year, and we met that goal with 72.4% of students in kindergarten reading at grade level. The second area is close achievement gaps. So with this area, there are 2 measures again, math and reading proficiency on the MCAs. For math, the goal was that 87.2% of all students would meet that proficiency benchmark on the MCAs. We did not meet that goal, unfortunately. There were 53.7% of students who met that proficiency benchmark. There are the goals and results listed across student groups presented there. We did not meet any of those goals. For reading, our goal was for 87.6% of students to meet that benchmark on the MCA reading exam. We also did not meet that goal. 54.4% of students were proficient on the MCA reading exam this year, or last year. The third area is all students career and college ready. And for this, we look at the percentage of students who meet the reading benchmark on the ACTs. The goal was for 60% of students in the graduating cohort of 2024 to meet that benchmark. We did not meet that goal. About half of the students met the reading benchmark. And then the last area for this year is all students graduate, and here we use the 4-year graduation rate. The goal was to have 93.95% of students in the graduating class of 2023 graduate within 4 years. We didn't meet that goal, but we are pretty close at 91.8%. This is just a summary of the work that we've done with the CACR. So in October, we had our first District Data and Assessment Advisory Committee meeting where I shared the results and got some feedback. In November, we submitted the report, and the report is posted on our assessment and grading website. I've been collecting feedback from interested parties around the new goal. I was able to spend some time with the youth ambassadors today and got some really helpful feedback. And then in the spring, I'll be working with the early education team to identify a long-term goal for the 3-year-old screening. So last year, because it was a new measure, we only did a 1-year goal. All right, I'm going to turn it back to Kelly.
Right, that is our first section for the CACR. What questions might you have?
Yep. So I just have one question. When we're comparing the goals, we're looking at what the goal was, and we're looking at our district, and then we're looking at Minnesota statewide, which we're above, the average of Minnesota statewide. But I'm wondering, do we know at all where we're at compared to like surrounding schools?
We could definitely get that information for you. We provided that for context because our goals are set by us, and then, so that's where Dr. Jacobson was saying that we did provide that for context, but we can certainly get those similar numbers for the similar districts that Superintendent Nielsen often refers to, so.
That'd be great, thank you.
I have a question. If we're using ACT to check reading, do all children take the ACTs?
We provide the ACT for all children.
But they don't all take it.
Our participation rate is pretty high.
It's about 80%.
About 80%. So we do provide the ACT to all of our students and that participation rate. So 80%, that goal is reflective of the 80% that took the ACT.
Half of them.
What's that?
Half of them were at?
Half of the 80%, I believe, was the.
So the ACT goal is actually based off of the graduating cohort of 2024. And so students could have taken the ACT multiple times, but that report takes into account the most recent set of scores.
Does it take into account just that April test date from when they're juniors, or does that, so it takes into account, so like if you've got a kid who gets a 36 and decides not to take it in April, they're still factored in?
Yep, so the ACT profile report is for all students who took the test, whether it was the district testing date or a national testing date.
Okay.
But they take the most recent set.
The most recent set, okay.
Yeah.
And this is just for the reading sub-score, so it doesn't
reading
take into account
subject.
math or science or the
They have
other
their
one?
own benchmarks.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what is our target score for the reading? Like, do we have a, like, I mean, I'm assuming it's not 36.
Yeah, so the benchmark on the reading is a score of 22. So
Okay.
the ACT scores range from 1 to 36, and the benchmark is 22.
The career college ready.
Yeah.
Benchmark.
And that's what's considered career and college, okay.
Yep.
Okay. And then one of the questions I had was, the new state guideline is to create lifelong learners, and you said that we are tasked with figuring out what that is. Has the state provided any guidelines about what they expect that to be? Or
Not
what-
not at this point. They really give that responsibility to districts. So we have the freedom to decide what that means for us and identify measures and goals.
And so we have to create this, and we have to figure out how we're going to measure it. So well, I guess this is probably not a question for now, but maybe later, like how are we going to assess if like today's 16-year-old really is a lifelong learner, right? And so I guess that's just.
Yeah, that's the feedback that we're collecting right now. We've
Okay.
talked to principals, DDAC, the youth advisory committee, so.
Okay. And then for the achievement gap stuff, so what the kids are getting on the MCAs is really quite a gap from what our goals are. And so are these, the goals that are set, are those the long-term goals that were set back in 2016?
Yes.
And so we never revisited those, like, as we saw the trajectory changing, we did not, so we still just have it measured against this one set of benchmarks?
Yep.
Okay. And is that the plan for the future too? Like we'll set another like 10-year goal and then try to work, or is there any like flexibility when we're, if we see that, okay, it's 55% of kids and we've got a, I don't know, goal of 80 and it's coming up in 2 years, maybe we want to either revise the goal or think about how we want to adapt.
Yeah, I think that's our work for next year.
Yep.
Okay.
And a reminder that those goals were goals that we chose to adopt that the Department of Education had set forth.
Oh, okay, so
back then. So it wasn't something that Dr. Jacobson came up with, or it was something that we saw that was their goal, and we said, you know what, that can be our goal too.
okay, so those are MDE's goals.
They were back then, yes.
Okay. So then statewide, they're also, they've never revised them statewide, given how students have performed statewide?
We were just looking at that document in which we adopted those from, and I've seen that evolve, so I haven't seen the 90% on them, but I can't say that they've said that's not our goal anymore.
Okay. And then actually, I do have one last question. So you had mentioned that 3-year-old learning was 47. Screening, sorry. I know what I'm talking about in here.
Yeah, we know, we know.
So that's 47% of 3-year-olds in the cohort of students coming to South Washington County, or is that 47% of all screening test takers?
The latter, so 47% of all students that we screened last year.
Do we tend to screen similar numbers of students per year?
That I don't know. Yeah, we'd have to connect with the early ed team.
Okay.
To give you that information.
We had a lot of conversation around that, so it helped me to understand that we screen all kids. Our goal is to screen them earlier. That's why we said the 3-year-old screening. So that was why that goal that started to make sense when I heard it that way.
Okay. Thank you.
One question. Now it's on. Okay, so it used to be that they changed, the state changed the cut score for a passing score for the MCAs. Are they still doing that for the reading, changing it every year?
So they don't change it every year, but there's different scores that identify the performance levels per grade. So
Okay.
it's still the MCA 3s, and they still have the same benchmark scores
Okay.
and levels. It's just, it's based off of grade levels, so 3rd grade has a different set of scores that identify whether they meet proficiency or not versus 4th, 5th grade.
And they're not changing that level? Okay.
Not until they do the MCA 4s.
Okay.
Have to recalibrate.
Okay.
I have one question for you. So specific to the math and reading measures, why are the proficiency goals different based on like ethnic groups? Why are these percentages that are goals, why are they different?
Just a reminder, we adopted those from the Department of Education. So the goal was to reach 90% for all students with no student subset being lower than 85%. So that's how that goal should read, is that the goal is 90% with no specific subgroup being lower than 85%.
Okay, yet our results here differ quite a bit.
Yeah.
Significantly. So I suppose that the next question is, what are the key drivers for this? Why are we so far away from the goal, especially if this is a long-term goal? It begs the question, have we not been making incremental improvements to this year over year? So I guess I'd like to see at some point a year over year chart of how we're meeting these goals, and are the efforts and investments that we're making actually making a meaningful difference in these outcomes?
Absolutely. We can get you that trend data for sure.
I'd like to see that. Yeah, thank you.
I have a real quick question too. Just with respect to the goals for math and reading as well. Are the strategies that are being employed every year to, I guess, get ourselves closer to the goal, are those being reassessed at certain increments yearly, or is it, and I guess what are the mechanisms for assessment on if the strategies are working?
Yeah, there's multiple. I would offer that, the system of MTSS, or multi-tiered system of support that we're building, has checks along the way for students learning. And so I would offer that teachers do multiple checks in their classroom that are aligned with our accountability measures. You've heard us talk about the MAP measures, or the MAP growth measures. You heard about the ERLA. So we are using other measures. And I think one of the things that kind of the silver lining was that kindergarten number, that we did reach our goal with the ERLA, that 70-ish% were reading at grade level by the end of kindergarten. So we use multiple measures, and I can certainly go back to the literacy report, or we can revisit those things during the math report, and we are always trying to do better. always trying to do better. And the kids that come to us every year are very different. And so we have to do different things every year because kids come to us from different spaces. So absolutely, we're continuously looking at what we're doing. You've heard about our standard instruction review cycle. So when we get new standards, we check our resources to make sure that teachers have what they need so that they can teach those standards. So
How many years has this system been in place?
the standard instruction review cycle since 2019.
Okay, and I mean, there's been continual progress from that year?
As far as the accountability measure of, I think that the anomaly obviously is COVID. So we had a COVID year of no testing and a year and some change of different learning. And so I think we are starting to see more of pre-COVID outcomes for SoWashCo students who traditionally have outperformed the state and their peers.
You know, I would just add, I think that if we look back in history, and sometimes it's really tough because we don't necessarily have a timekeeper as we go through with the different iterations of the MCAs. But when we take a look at the investment that South Washington County Schools made in curriculum overall, it was very minimal. There was a period of time where we had very outdated health books. We didn't even have a literacy curriculum. And so in the last 10 years, we have begun to consistentize, that's my word, that we have resources in our teachers' hands that are similar. And so I think that the kindergarten scores that we're seeing are certainly a good indication, but we know that when we implemented Bridges, that was one of the first adoptions in math that we had in many, many years. We did not have common resources across our elementary schools. So Bridges was the first one. Bridges got interrupted by COVID. We're picking back up, we're seeing great things. And I think ARC, we're going to see a similar trend, that we're going to see that the investment that with our calendar in professional development, along with what's happening with our new ARC resources, that consistency across 16 elementary schools will make a difference. I have every reason to believe that we're going to continue to see our reading and our math scores go up because we are making some significant investments. And if it doesn't go up, Eric, I think it was Eric or Ryan, what you said, then we need to reevaluate what we're doing in the classrooms to say what's going wrong and what do we need to do. And I would say that definitely our teachers and our staff play a huge part. You know, we're also expanding our work. When we talk about students being literate and math literate, we also know that parents and families play a role. And we have had those conversations around the use of technology. It's really tough when students are so plugged into technology that they're not speaking or they're not communicating, because students come then to school at a real deficit. They may have some language development, but if they're not using their language, it's really difficult to make that transition. And I think we can go anywhere and see a lot of use of technology. If we take a look back at our trend scores in South Washington County Schools, you're going to take a look at about 2013 to 2016, and you're going to start to see a dip. This was a district that was 90% proficient. You know, teachers in our district aren't doing anything that is that extremely different. So what else has changed? And what's changed is smartphones came into play. So now, as a school district, we have to think about how do we navigate that. And I think as board members, you know that we've already put some restrictions in high schools and middle schools on the use of cell phones. We need to make sure that students are engaged in the content and that they're focused at school. Our kids are very, very intelligent and very articulate, and I think obviously when we look at these test scores relative to where the state set those goals, we're very disappointed. But I think to know that there is great hope that we were a district, that when we got our third grade MCAs, our classes in third grade across this district sat at about an average of about 85 to 90% proficient. So I know that it's absolutely possible by reinvesting in our core resources and professional development for our teachers.
So Julie or Kelly, I know when we introduce a new curriculum, like the next couple years, you see scores go down, right? So how long do we typically expect to start seeing the dividends of the new ARC curriculum or the new Bridges curriculum?
So the standard answer is 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
You'll see an implementation dip, and then you'll start to see it come back up.
Okay, so like in 5 years, it will be back where it was like before the implementation, or it should be above where it was before the implementation?
That's what we would anticipate we would see.
That it's above where we were before the
Yes.
implementation? Okay. And so with the, like, Julie, you had mentioned that there's some like preliminary benefits we're seeing now that all the schools are using common curriculum. And so one of the questions I have is, so they have so many different assessments. Is MCA the only assessment that's sort of appropriate to use when we're doing this report?
No, that's what we chose.
Okay.
Was that MCA, so,
Do
but
we-
yeah, you saw that we chose the ERLA.
Right.
For that, so.
So do we see like a difference in, say, like kids' MAP scores versus their MCA scores for math, right? Like we, would we anticipate that there is some different, we may see kids being more or less proficient depending on the tests that they happen to take?
Well, they're two different tests.
Right.
So, right, we measure that growth with MAP. We can dive into that for math. We did show that for the literacy slides, and I can dig that back out too. But that is something that we can decide that could be our measure for the CACR. And yet we also know that MCAs are the state accountability tests, and those are the benchmarks for the priority, or for the state standards. And so we don't want to shy away from performance on them as well. So I do think those other tests you mentioned are the tests that we are using to use during the year so that we can respond to kids where they're at and move them forward.
Yeah, I think I was thinking more
But-
like a blended or some sort of like, you know what I mean? If kids are taking multiple assessments, should we use multiple assessments to assess how kids are doing?
And we do, and that's what those curriculum reports provide. So the literacy curriculum report was, you know, a section of the data of our kids that we have. And we'll do the same with math, and we'll do the same with science, so.
Now, if I'm right, like, it would be difficult as far as MCA versus MAP, because MCA, all kids are taking this, the same test, where with MAP, you know, each kid's taking a little bit different thing, because you get higher as you go, as you answer more answers correctly.
They're just two very
So,
different
yeah.
tests.
So it would be
You know,
difficult.
I would offer that even the physicalness, the physical environment of taking the map with your teacher in the classroom on your Chromebook is different than the MCA, which feels like a bigger thing.
It's like a higher stakes
Yep,
vibe.
yeah.
And then what percentage of our students take the MCAs in any given year?
Yeah, the participation rates were presented in October. I don't have them in front of me, and so we'll revisit those, and then we'll make sure that those are in the October, or in the January report as well.
Yeah, it would just be interesting also
Yeah.
to see like if there's a trend line of how,
There's
or
yeah.
even if there's like an understanding of who is opting out.
Yep.
Right, like if it's all like, I don't know.
Yep.
The nerdiest among us opting out, like, is that skewing our data?
Yeah, I can tell you that our trend line is more kids are opting out.
Okay.
And in particular at our high school level.
Okay.
They're just not seeing value in the MCA.
Okay.
All right, let's move on to the A&I plan report.
Good evening, everyone. Achievement and integration revenue began in 2013, 2014. That replaced Minnesota's former integration revenue program. The A&I program in Minnesota is meant to address a couple different items. First, to pursue racial and economic integration, increase student achievement, create equitable educational opportunities, and to reduce academic disparities based on students' diverse racial, ethnic, and/or economic backgrounds. So SoWashCo is required to participate in A&I, as it has been identified as a racially isolated school district. This means that enrollment of protected class students district-wide is more than 20% compared to the number of protected class students enrolled in one of our adjoining districts. For the purposes of achievement and integration, protected class refers to students who self-identify as Black or African American, Asian or Pacific Islander American, Chicano or Latino Americans, American Indian or Alaska Native, and or multiracial students. I always want to put this caveat in because like everything, or most things in our district, these things don't happen in a silo. So while the DEI department oversees the A&I plan and measurements, the things that we're doing, the strategies and the measurements are cross-department initiatives. So while I'll do the report, DEI and A&I are not synonymous, and multiple departments contribute towards the achievement of the goals that we have in our current A&I plan. So A&I in Minnesota runs on 3-year cycles, and last year was our first year of our current plan. So I'll be reporting on our baseline year. And we changed the model of our goals a little bit from what we had traditionally done and what many districts have traditionally done, which would be something like 3 to 5 SMART goals. Rather, this year we have 3 overarching goals. Each of them has multiple key indicators of progress, which have their own rubrics that we've developed internally and then submitted to the state. The 3 goal areas that we have are student academic success and access, relationships and affirmation of social identities, and community engagement. Goal number 1, SoWashCo students demonstrate self-efficacy, engagement, and proficiency in the academic expectations required to apply to a 4-year college or university. We do not believe that every student must go to college or university, but we do believe that if we have educated our students to be able to apply, that we have done a satisfactory job in our academic preparation. For the relationship goal, SoWashCo students, staff, and families have access to culturally affirming spaces and programming meant to build meaningful relationships in schools and communities. And the goal for our community engagement is that SoWashCo students, staff, and families are empowered to frequently and efficiently access resources and programming offered by our district. Once again, all of these goals are measured by multiple key indicators of progress. So for goal 1, our academic success and access goal, we are on track to meet this goal. I did want to tell you some of the examples of the key indicators that we use to determine our progress toward this goal. The impact of our academic success coaches that we have at some of our elementary schools. They're doing behavioral and academic interventions with students at our schools that have the highest rate of free and reduced lunch eligibility and racial and ethnic diversity. Other strategies or key indicators that we're looking at are not just representation in advanced coursework or rigorous coursework, but also our students finding success in those courses as well. We wanted to make sure that we weren't overinflating some of our key indicators by saying, yes, we've got a lot of students from this background in this class, and they're all failing. So we wanted to keep an eye on both representation and success. And then A&I plays a huge role in the implementation of AVID district-wide as well. And so we also looked at, is AVID meeting its intended goals? And I know there's program evaluation that's happening with AVID. We took a couple of the key indicators like application to college and acceptance into university as a result of being a student in the AVID program. Goal number 2, regarding culturally affirming spaces and relationships, we're also on track to meet this goal as well. Some of the students that are here at our Youth Advisory Committee, these are students that we were getting feedback from regarding how inclusive do the spaces at your school feel? Do you have trusting relationships with adults? Do you see yourself reflected? Do you see your culture reflected in the curriculum, in the spaces, and in your peers? And we've worked really hard to make sure that as we talk about culture, we're not just focused solely on race, ethnicity, but affirming all the identities that our students are bringing into spaces. And so the questions that we ask students are, do you feel like you can show up as your authentic self and you're not going to be bullied or harassed? And are you sure that your identities are not going to be a hindrance to your academic and social success? Other things that we have, or other key indicators that we have in this goal are regarding our racial harm response protocol. It's training for our system leaders, its usage, and then is it making an impact on the number of racial harm incidents that we're experiencing and how we're handling them? Are we mitigating them for future situations? Then finally, our community engagement goal, we are also on track to meet this goal. This is looked at the number of opportunities that our community had to engage in both cultural learning and cultural celebratory events. This is also, for me as a department leader, making sure that I am taking the work of diversity, equity, and inclusion outside of our silo and making sure that we're partnering with principals and other departments to group lift this work. So one of the things that we're really focused on is our partnership with community education to make sure that the resources that they have at their disposal, that we're leveraging each other rather than doing redundant work side by side. So our next steps, that last year was our baseline year, and so we're going to continue to analyze the key indicators as they're coming in. We've already got usable data to make some instructional and social moves based on the key indicators that we've determined. And we'll continue to work with our partner districts as well, because we partner with integration activities with Roseville, Stillwater, and Rosemont, Apple Valley, Egan school districts for some of our integration activities.
What questions might you have about the A&I plan?
James, can I just ask a question? So you mentioned that we are required to have this because we are a racially isolated district, because we have 20%. Now I'm trying to find the slide.
I'll get the exact language for us. The enrollment of protected class students district-wide is 20% higher than at least one of our adjoining districts.
Okay, so our district is roughly like 60-40, right? White students and students of color, correct? So what this is saying is that like Stillwater or Hastings or one of those districts is 20% or less. Okay.
Than us.
Than us.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I guess maybe I'm just confused by the term racially isolated if we're so not isolated, right? I feel like if we're split 60-40, we're not really.
Yeah, it's a, you know, I think it could be easily confused with racially isolated schools, which districts could have a racially identifiable school if it's observed that there's a certain school that has a significantly higher non-white population. However, what this means for us, it's actually has nothing to do with anything right or wrong that we're doing. It just has to do with the demographics with us compared to our neighboring districts.
And so what then as, like what is the state's, I guess, purpose in having, so does Stillwater or whoever, Hastings, I don't know which district is, but I'm guessing one of those, are they're also required because they are 20%?
No, so what they'd be considered as an adjoining district, and for adjoining districts, it is voluntary to participate in the A&I program. Stillwater, for instance, does, and as an adjoining district with a racially isolated district like ours, we are then in communication to have inter-district integration activities. So one of the things that we do to have integration between our districts is summer AVID programming, where we'll have AVID opportunities for high school students from multiple districts where they can come together and do AVID fine arts courses, or I think maybe even an AVID, or was there FIAD? I can't remember, but AVID arts courses for sure is one of the integration activities that we have.
Okay, and then can you help me understand, like, what is the state's, I guess, goal for us as a racially, or for racially isolated districts? Like, what is it that the Achievement and Integration Plan they are hoping to accomplish by having racially isolated districts take part in this?
I think part of it goes back to seeing integration, recognizing that integration is not just important within a district, but when we are neighbors with these other districts, I mean, a city like Woodbury has multiple school districts in it. So how are we partnering then with other districts so students are getting a diverse, ethnically diverse experience, or at least opportunities, if you're in a space that is either higher or lower in their racial and ethnic enrollments. Part of the other thing for us is it's created this multi-district collaboration opportunity that we have with multiple districts around the metro, where we're trading strategies, comparing like what's working for you. And A&I has been a vehicle for us to then have some of those conversations as well. Yeah.
I have a question for you. So the A&I Plan Goal 1, it states that our students will demonstrate self-efficacy, engagement, proficiency, and academic expectations. And so you list some examples of these KPIs, or KIPs, I guess is the terminology we're using today.
Yeah.
You state that the status is on track.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious to know how we can be on track given the measures we saw previously on the CACR.
It's great.
When we are so far behind with the student populations that are being highlighted with this type of program. So I'd like to know, how can we state that we're on track when we're clearly not?
Well, we are on track. What we're seeing is the difference between district-developed goals that we got to build internally and then submit to the state for their approval versus something like a standardized MCA test. So one of the things that we look at is, for instance, our representation in AP courses. Do we have representation by race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status that is comparable to our actual student breakdown in those schools? So we look at that in representations in some of our rigorous courses. And then we're looking at what's the success rate of students in those courses, still broken down by race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic status. In those key indicators, we are seeing that we are on track and that we've got parity between our school overall population numbers and demographic breakdowns and the representation and success in those individual courses. Not looking at MCA, IRLA, or some of those other measures that were mentioned in the CACR. These are looking more specifically at specific courses or programs that are happening in elementary schools.
Are you able then to tie that back into being, ready to apply for a four-year college or university if we're not going to make any of these measures based off of the actual standardized measures that we have?
Yeah, so one of the things, two of the things that we looked at, and I'd be happy to share the full supplemental evidence with the board. We did look at the number of, for instance, AVID being a college and career readiness pathway. How many of our students in the AVID program, are we meeting our intended number for how many students can apply, did apply, and were accepted? So those are things that we're keeping an eye on with this plan as well.
I did have one question. So you had mentioned that the number of students at the high school is taking like AP calculus, let's call it, because it's my favorite example. Sure. The number of students taking AP calculus is roughly in proportion with the demographics, or AP classes in general, I guess, is roughly in proportion with the demographics of that school. Is that what you're saying?
I'd have to look up that specific one. So what we did for these key indicators is broke down like AP, IB.
Oh, okay.
So like
Okay.
we went rigorous course by rigorous course,
Okay.
rather than doing the, all right, let's just lump all of the rigorous courses or advanced coursework together. And we wanted to get more granular, so then we had actionable steps if we're seeing lack of representation or lack of success.
So does this ever flow back to like elementary where, and the reason why I bring up calculus is because it's one of the classes where you have to prepare for it in, third grade, right? So does this flow back to our elementary schools so that our elementary school students, as they are getting what they need to 5 years from now enroll in these types of classes, or is that part of this? Shoot. It's all good.
I would say that we've done a lot of work on our math pathways. So I think your statement of they have to be ready for calculus in third grade AP.
No, I mean like
yeah,
they have
I
to
hear
get
what because I think that was the message out there, that if they're not in accelerated math, then they're not going to meet Calc AP. They won't get to Calc AP. And so we've done a lot of work with our math pathway so that students have a lot of on-ramps and off-ramps.
Okay.
So.
Yep. And so do we know then, like if you get up to the high school and you're looking at the different elementary schools or middle schools that feed in, do we know how the different schools socioeconomically or like we get, X percent of the kids in this school come from Liberty Ridge, and so X percent of kids in advanced classes are from Liberty Ridge or Newport or Gray Cloud, or is it still kind of, that's maybe a level of detail we don't have?
For the purpose of this report, we didn't get that granular.
I would say for the study on the accelerated math pathway, we did. Because we knew that there were some elementaries that was their math pathway, and we knew that there were others that didn't offer accelerated math pathways. So that was a lot of the data that we pulled 5 years ago when we studied that math pathway. It's a much deeper dive into the student information systems to do that cross-tracking, but we did.
Okay. And so, like, are we seeing that then, like, bear fruit or on the path to bearing fruit then?
I'm speculating if I'd say anything. I would say when we did that, what we found is students who were accelerated too early weren't successful in high school math classes.
Oh, okay.
And so that was some of the data that we used for rationalizing, slowing down that acceleration so that to make sure that students are ready and to ensure families you will still get to the class that you want or you think, where your child needs to be.
Okay.
So, yeah, I said that was, I know the first thing I said was something we studied, but I'd have to dive into what you asked.
No, this is great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to 8.0 action items. 8.1 is truth and taxation, and that will be presented by Chris Blackburn, Director of Business Services.
Good evening, Chair Schwartz. Oh my goodness, apparently it is definitely a Thursday this week. Good evening, Chair Schwartz, school board members, and Superintendent Nielsen. Dan used to call this the Super Bowl of finance, and I don't know, maybe Pro Bowl, was the audit then, I'm not sure. But he did actually text Julie and I and say 29 years, and it's the first time he has not been at one. I did invite him here, but he had other plans for this evening, so. Anyway, thank you again for the time this evening. So as you know, that we're required by Minnesota state law with regard to tax levies, that they're very regulated. And so state law does require, I'm going to skip ahead a slide, I'll slow down. A public meeting between November 25th and December 30th has to be at 6 p.m. or later, and so as tonight, got a little bit later than 6 p.m. But it does also have to be it may be part of a regularly scheduled meeting. It must allow for public comments. Haha, I get to control. Not used to not having the clicker. Seems dangerous to give me one. But again, it does have to be, it may be part of a regularly scheduled meeting. It must allow for public comments, and the board may adopt a levy at the same meeting. It includes then, and required to include a presentation of the current year budget as well as the proposed tax levy. And again, just a reminder that on September 26th, we did approve the preliminary levy at the maximum. And so this is just kind of that follow-up meeting to set the final levy. Tonight, the hearing agenda then is to provide background on the information on school funding, to provide kind of information on the district's budget as well as the district's proposed tax levy for taxes payable in 2025, and then also an opportunity to provide public comments. Minnesota's legislature does, again, we talk about this quite often, but that they do set the funding for Minnesota schools. This has a lot of detail on it, but again, it's that uniform system of schools, and it just talks about how they do set that funding. The last part, the legislature shall make such provisions by taxation or otherwise as will secure a thorough and efficient system of public schools throughout the state. So again, that mindfulness that they wrote right into the Constitution, our requirement really to provide that, and authorization to do the levies. The state then sets formulas which determine revenue, and most revenue is based on specific amounts per pupil. The tax policy for local schools is also set by the state. The maximum authorized property tax levy is also calculated and set by the state. We can levy less, and we did discuss that, I think, as we set that at the maximum. We always have the opportunity to levy less if we so choose, but we cannot authorize more than that amount that was approved in the preliminary, unless there's a vote. And so this year, of course, we were not on the ballot, but last year we were with regard to the capital projects levy. So authorized, we can submit those referendums again. So again, funding is highly regulated for school districts. The basic general education formula, again, another topic that we talk frequently about, does lag behind inflation. Since 2002 and 3, it's not kept pace with inflation. This past year, in 23-24, we did see a 4% increase in the formula based on the previous year. This current year, in 24-25, we've seen an increase of 2%. We know as we look forward that they have said in statute that we'll receive a minimum of 2% and a maximum of 3%. And again, that's always subject to legislative change. But had they kept pace with inflation, we would have needed an additional, or would have received an additional $1,364 per student. So again, that significant, I'll say, deficit in funding, which also leads us to why we need an operating referendum. This is a graphical representation of that gap, and so you can see that it's just continued to increase since that 2002-2003. Another factor is underfunding of special education, and so they've made some significant inroads in the past number of years, and we'll see another increase in 27 is scheduled for. But in FY23, according to the Department of Education, the cost of providing these programs were underfunded statewide by $728 million. And again, even with those recent inroads to the funding, they predict that will be $455 million statewide underfunded by FY27. The primary options that are available to us are really to reduce other programming or to increase operating referendums, which again we did, and many districts have chosen to do kind of a combination or one or the other. Budget information. So tonight, because of school approval, district lags the certification of the tax levy by 6 months. State law requires only the current year budget information be presented at this hearing. So the 25-26 budget we'll actually talk about come June of 2025. So that's when the revenue will actually, that we're going to be discussing tonight, the revenue will actually be claimed as revenue in 26 for us in 25-26. But again, this coming June that we'll adopt that budget. So tonight we'll discuss the 24-25 budget. They're divided in different funds. I have a great team in finance and keeps track of all these dollars and all the different buckets. And as you know, building construction is one of the funds listed, and there's a lot of activity going on right now and in the next few years. But our primary operating funds are general fund, food service fund, and community service. And of those, general fund is vastly the largest of all of these funds. Like I said, mentioned at building construction fund. We also have debt service fund, trust fund, and that is really our scholarships for any scholarships of which we kind of have oversight of, and then other post-employment benefits trust. This slide is a little bit hard to read, but it does show the district revenues and expenditures. It provides both an actual for FY24 and the budgeted revenues and expenditures FY25. You'll notice the top two lines are general restricted, and that really is dollars that are very specified in use and restricted. And then the next line is general other. And if you add those two together to get the overall fund balance. So just to keep that in mind, that there are two lines for general fund. But it does describe the revenues, expenditures, and fund balance for all the other funds as well, and the total on the bottom. I will point out on this slide that we did eliminate the internal service fund this past June, and so you'll notice that that is no longer appears going forward. So revenue, all funds, which we don't often talk about, but they're across the all of those funds we just discussed for 24-25, we have a $398 million, a little more than, for revenue dollars. As you can see, 82% of those are in general fund. So the most significant, again, as I discussed, is in that general operating fund. Food service, community service make up another about 7% combined. And then again, we have some in building construction. Not a lot of income right now for this year. Debt service, trust, and the OPEB trust. When it comes to the general fund revenues for 24-25, we have $328 million. The state revenue of that makes up 69% of our revenue. And so as I looked at it, kind of ballpark about half of that. When we talk about that basic education formula, that's about half of that number. And so when that's lagging, that's a significant kind of issue for us. Our local taxpayers, we've been extremely fortunate to have a generous community that supported those operating levies, also the capital projects referendum levy, and so those dollars would be reflected in that. The most significant piece is, of course, those local levies, but there are some additional items such as interest and other in that category as well. I'll point out on here, just because we've heard a lot of conversation about the federal government and Department of Education and such, and I've gotten asked that question a couple of times, what impact might we have? And on a financial sense, we have about $5.3 million is all that we receive in federal education aid. So it's just not even 2% of our budget, so a real slim part in the general fund at least. Food service does get some money as well, so. General fund expenditures by object. So I always say this is what did you use it for? Again, you'll notice that salary, wages, and employee benefits, but combined between the two, make up over 78% of our budget. So again, I always remind people that the challenges for us when we talk about budget really is we could cut all that supplies out, $13 million, but it's only 4% of our budget. So we could never buy another piece of paper or a piece of technology or anything, and it's tough to make inroads when we have those budget adjustment periods. General fund expenditures by program then. So this one is really, I call it the function. How do we use those monies? And again, I'll point out that over 75%, I think it's 76 point something, is direct on instruction. And that's that regular instructional category of 42.6. That's teachers in classrooms, as is the special education instruction at another 21.6. Vocational ed, so some of the career tech is 0.9%. Community service is our voluntary pre-K and school readiness plus programming. And that's just a small percentage, but just to know that that is that direct instruction as well. The pupil support services at the top is at 11% or $37 million, and that is our Transportation particularly, it's also school counselors and social workers is in that number. Instructional support services, sometimes I do get asked about that number, and that is assistant principals. It's also media, and then there's professional development. So a lot of times I call it the teachers or the staff supporting staff as well in that number. Sites and buildings, so everything from keeping the lights on to snow plowing. Luckily, we haven't had a lot of that this year, but that's another 11%. And I'll just point out that when we look at that, administration and district support services is just under 7% that we spend on that. And so we try really mindfully to keep those dollars in the classroom. Just to note that change in tax levy does not determine a change in budget. So sometimes we do get asked if levy goes up, do you guys get to spend more money? And the answer is no. Tax levy is based on many state-determined formulas, plus voter-approved referendums. Some increases in tax levies are actually revenue neutral. So although the levy might go up, we often receive less aid in certain categories. Expenditure budget is limited by state-set revenue formulas, the voter-approved levies, and fund balance. So we can only spend what we get and kind of what we have. And an increase in school taxes does not always correlate to an increase in budget then. The difference in levy cycles. So the school district, again, we kind of have that different lagging a little bit that we do run our budget year begins July 1st. Our 25 taxes will be that revenue in 25-26, and that budget for 25-26 will be adopted this coming June. So in about 7 months' time, I'll be back up here talking budget instead. The city and county, as we know, run on a calendar year. So they actually start their budget cycle on January 1st and run through December 31st. And so the 25 taxes payable will actually be revenue for 25. So they're more current. This just provides a sample of parcel-specific notice mailed to every property owner between November 10th and 25th. And that's required as well, so the county distributes and acts as our fiscal agent on all property taxes. They pay property taxes to various taxing jurisdictions, so every property owner does receive this, and again, they'll pay perhaps to the county, to the city, to the school district. There may be special taxing districts. Each taxing jurisdiction sets their own tax levy, and so on the statement, it does identify kind of when the meeting information, so it had our information for this evening on that notice as well. And the levy itself is set often by state law for those jurisdictions as well. And again, the county acts as that fiscal agent, so they send the bill, collect the taxes, and then remit and distribute back to the other jurisdictions. For the school district property taxes, each school has limited authority to levy taxes, and the levy MDE calculates that levy and amounts for various categories which are either set by state law or voter approval, as we've discussed this evening. In the process, there's kind of 6 steps listed here, but the city or county assessor determines the market value, so that's outside of our control for each parcel of property. The legislature then sets formulas for tax capacity and school district levy limits. The county auditor then calculates the tax capacity for each parcel of property, as well as total tax capacity for each school district. The Minnesota Department of Education calculates detailed levy limits, and so there's multi-page reports that we kind of sift through to make sure that they are accurately reflecting what we think they ought to. But the levy limits for each school district based on the formulas approved by legislature. The 5th step is the school board sets the levy, and we're really the only step in the process. So we approved that preliminary levy in September, and now the final levy will put forth for approval this evening. The last step then is the county auditor dividing that final levy by the district's total tax capacity to determine the tax rate need to raise that levy amount. Approval of district's tax levy. So again, just that reminder, on September 8th, MDE prepared and distributed the first levy limit report, and we setting the maximum authorized levy as well, and we've started sifting through that. On September 26th, we approved that proposed levy amount at the maximum. And I say air quotes kind of with that, but that's the term that they use is set at the maximum. There's not a dollar value associated. In mid-November, the county mailed the proposed property tax statements. I did receive a few phone calls, have had 3 very nice conversations with taxpayers, so that's always fun for me. December 12th, yeah, it is fun, no laughing. December 12th, we have the public hearing, which is this evening, and then following the hearing, we'll ask that the board certify the final levy amounts. In the overview, just a broad level, so what are we approving this evening? This evening, the proposed 25 property tax levy reflects an increase of $1.5 million or 1.2% over last year. And the changes by levy category and the reasons are on the upcoming slides. So this first slide is really just a comparison of the 25 proposed compared to the actual 24. So you can see that 1.2% increase at the bottom. It does illustrate by general fund, community service fund, debt service, and then it provides a total for all funds. And then the very bottom, there's the voter approved and the other, and that's actually how it will reflect on the property tax statements. So explanation of the levy changes, the first one is the voter approved operating referendum, and that's about $622,000 higher. And again, the reminder of this, the reason for the changes we did, again, the voters approved that inflationary factor when they approved the levy, the operating referendum this last round. And so it was offset by decrease somewhat. It probably would have increased higher, but some of that enrollment, the projected decline in enrollment at the time, offset that sum. Local optional revenue is up about $530,000. And that's revenue is provided a combination of state aid and local tax levy. And so because our property value increased, the share of funding through the tax levy also increased. Voter approved technology referendum, again, this was successful last fall. And so $672,000 is the increase there. And that levy is based on a voter approved tax rate applied to the tax base. So a slightly different, rather than an amount, it's a tax rate that's approved. And since our tax base increased, that amount increased as well. Long-term facilities maintenance actually had a reduction this year of $880,000. We are eligible for LTFM revenue based on state-approved project costs, and levies are coordinated with other capital and debt levies to try to maintain a stable or declining tax rate for our taxpayers. And so as we look at that long-term planning, sometimes there's levy or bonded cost, and this reflects that. Instructional lease costs did increase by $819,000, and I'm pleased to share today we closed on the property for the transition program, and that's what this lease was for the special education transition program, so that we'll be able to combine those two programs that are in separate sites right now. In debt service, the voter approved levy actually went down $1.9 million, and that's just, again, as we kind of think your mortgage, right? When you pay off a little bit more, sometimes that slowly decreases the amount that you have to pay, so that we're required to pay a levy for 105% of our district debt service payments to cover any delinquencies in tax collections. And again, we often coordinate the debt service just overall when we bond to make sure that we're, again, that stable or kind of declining tax rate for our taxpayers. So again, some of the questions I get, well, if my house value goes up, do I pay, don't you guys just get more money then? And really what it does is it just shifts that allocation. And so we've talked about the pie slide before, but just that reminder that the higher the market value increase, it just changes. Do you have a bigger slice of the pie or a smaller slice? Each property owner just pays a portion, but that total pie doesn't change. So this just shows the impact of property valuations then. And again, we have two properties in the district, and they're each valued at $100,000, and I'll say that there's a $500 total tax levy, and they would each pay equal amounts at $250 each. If we look to maybe the next year, and the property valuation, the orange house increased 10%, and the blue house increased 25%. So again, just that shift in one house increased in value by a more significant amount. Our total levy itself still stays at $500, but it does generate the orange house will pay a little bit less, and the blue house will now pay a little bit more because of that change in valuation. Legislatively, we always like to just give a little update too, and changes for Pay 25, the things that impacted. In 2023, the legislature passed laws that affected our taxes payable this upcoming year. And to recap, those two most significant changes were the tax benefit to homeowners, so the homestead exclusion increased on valuations from $76,000 to $517, kind of a graduated schedule. And then it also increased the first tier limit for ag homestead land to $3.5 million from 3.5 to 3.5 from 2.15. So that happens when I put those backwards. So the 4-year school levy comparison. So the next really just illustrates the impact on property taxes. It's just meant as an example or illustrative purposes only. And so we talk about if there was no change to valuation, and then if we reflected the net over those years was 27.2 over the past 4 years is what home values have increased over that time frame. Again, actual across the district, certainly we've had vastly different changes in values, but, so this is again intended just a fair representation of what happened to school district property taxes over that for typical properties. The examples provided are for a property in the city of Woodbury, and the 25 are preliminary estimates, and final amounts could change slightly. These estimates are also prepared by Ellers, which is our district municipal financial advisors. So again, a slide that's slightly hard to read, but it does have the, if no changes in property tax values, what would the school property tax amounts done, what would have happened between 2022 and 2025. And I'll point out really that second to last column, the column in kind of right between the two gray columns there, and you notice that every one of them would go down. And so we really try hard to be fiscal stewards of our taxpayer money, and this just illustrates that. Again, but it does, that value of the homeowners will impact, or the value of the properties will impact that change. But had nothing changed, we actually would have seen a decrease in the school district taxes. Again, these slides reflect no changes in property tax values and provide a couple illustrations of a $250,000 residential homestead property, as well as a $450,000 residential homestead property. So you can see again that kind of what would have declined had there been no change in value in each of those situations. Similarly, these two, this is a $600,000 residential homestead property, and then also a $1 million commercial industrial property. And so again, you can see that decline in taxes, again, had there been no change in property value. Estimated changes then, so if we do take that cumulative effect over the 4 years on property values of 27.2% increase, and this one just provides two examples, one at $250,000 residential and one at $450,000 residential. And so you will see that increase, but again, those home values increased 27.2%. So there was a significant increase in home value over that time frame, and so there's a corresponding increase in property tax levy. So as we get near the end here, state property tax deferrals and refunds and deferrals. I used to do property or tax work, and I said, so it would often come spring season, have taxpayers come in with their property tax statements when they got them in April and May and say, hey, can we do my property tax refund? So these are all administered either by the state of Minnesota, typically through the Department of Revenue. So the first one is homestead credit refund. The second is special property tax refund, and that first one is available to all homestead property, residential and agricultural. It's on a sliding scale, and the maximum refund is $3,310 for homeowners. Renters can also apply for this refund, and the maximum refund is $2,640 for them. On the special property tax refund, it has to do with if the, I'll point to that second bullet, if refund is 60% of tax increase that exceeds the greater. So what it does is it provides some relief if your taxes went up significantly. The last one is a senior citizen property tax deferral, often referred to as Green Acres. And so it provides an opportunity for people over 65 years of age, 65 years or older, with a household income of $96,000 or less. They can defer a portion of property taxes on their home. And so the deferred property taxes plus accrued interest must be paid when the home is sold or when the homeowner would pass away. And so that does provide some relief, although sometimes there can be that little hook at the end as well, when they, particularly if they sell that. So it's always mindful, but sometimes when you're on a fixed income, this can be a really useful program to participate in. So the next steps tonight, we'll have asked the chair to take public comment on the proposed levy. And then at the end, after following public comment, if there is any, then we'll ask for a motion to certify the 2025 property tax levy. With that.
Any public comment? Okay. Okay, can I get a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second. Motion by Simi, seconded by Melinda. Any comments?
I had a question, which I cannot believe I forgot to ask the other night at CFAC. But so this is the 1.2% increase is on the local portion of our budget only, or is it one? It's no, sorry, I lied. So when I multiplied 1.2% times the amount of local dollars that we have, between that number and 1.5 million, which is the levy amount, there is a $400,000 difference. So what is the driver of that difference? Like, what are the funds or whatever that are?
So it would likely be community service, because they would not be in that.
In that local funding.
Correct, and neither would debt service be in that portion either.
Perfect.
I feel like I'm trying to slide back to the slide, but I'll keep going for Abby instead.
That's all I wanted
Yes.
to know. I realized
No,
I was just
and that's a
trying to
really
math
good
the
question,
math.
because in general fund, certainly the predominance is general fund, but there certainly is community service and debt service
Okay.
impact as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, seeing no other comments, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, on to 8.2, and that is our Kids Club Supervisor Agreement presented by Abby Baker, Executive Director of Human Resources and Operations.
Good evening, Chair Schwartz, members of the school board, and Superintendent Nielsen. Good news, I have the shortest report tonight. Tonight, I will be presenting 8.2, and that's the tentative agreement with Kids Club supervisors. Negotiations toward a new collective bargaining agreement between South Washington County Schools and the Kids Club supervisors and Teamsters 320 have resulted in a tentative agreement to be effective July 1, 2024 to June 30th, 2026. I will note that this is our last contract of this cycle, and we are a little behind with this group because they changed membership this summer, and so we had to go through the petition to get them represented by Teamsters 320. Members of the union approved the tentative agreement on December 3rd, 2024, and the economic costing of the tentative agreement includes the following. For wages in year 1 of the contract, it was a 6.25 increase that includes retro pay. Year 2 is a 3.75 increase. For health insurance beginning January 1, 2025, it's a 10% increase of the district contribution to the high deductible plans. And then for 2026, it's an 8% increase to the high deductible plans. For dental insurance, it's an increase of a district contribution from $20 per month to $42.96 per month for single coverage and $60 for family coverage. We did increase the district's TSA, which is the 403B plan, annual matching plan contribution of $100, and we added Juneteenth to the holiday schedule. So we recommend approval of this contract.
Can I get a motion to approve?
So move.
Second.
Moved by Pat, seconded by Simi. Any comments? I do have one. How many supervisors? This is a small group, isn't it?
It is a
Those are
small
the
group.
Supervisors,
Yep,
right?
so we have 19 Kids Club supervisors. Mhm.
Any other comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, on to 9.0, and that is our superintendent report.
Thank you. To share with the board and community, this week we hosted the music showcase. Well, we hosted one of the music showcases, I should say, and this was the one I could attend. That showcase is for our 5th graders who are taking a look at band, orchestra, or choir. So I attended the showcase at Park High School, where I think 5 or 6 elementary schools bused their 5th graders there. They got to watch our really cool district video about being in middle school, done by our communications department. And then they also got to listen to the full groups play and or sing. They got to have breakout sessions with the actual instruments. And I think the highlight was just going into a high school. Sometimes we forget how cool it is for elementary kids to go into a high school. And then like, oh, there's my brother goes here, and just the conversations that they have as they're entering. So just really a nice opportunity to highlight our band, orchestra, and choir programs. Next, we held our first literacy evening. It was our SoWashCo Family Literacy Academy. And while a small attendance, I would just encourage anyone who is interested in the future. We will have 2 more sessions. It was very helpful. And many times families come together when their children may be struggling readers or writers. And so just taking a look at the presentation from phonemic awareness to phonics to fluency to vocabulary and comprehension, and thinking about how we can incorporate strategies to help support students as readers and writers in natural ways. All of the fun car games you can play and grocery store games that you can play. Your kids will love you when you're done. But there are really so many great ways to incorporate literacy into the day as parents and family members. And so we were able to highlight the 5 pillars of literacy and then talk about ways that families can help support that. I also want to point out, yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or maybe 2 days ago, we had our first GED graduation ceremony of 5 adults. I want you to know, Joe, if you're watching, Joe was 71 years old. And really the highlight of the celebration was watching his family, watching his son, watching his grandchildren watch him get his GED. And so thank you to Susie Evans and her team. Just really quite an honor to be part of that celebration and recognition. And we did have 5 total graduates that received their GEDs. This coming Saturday, December 14th, we will have a very big, very large, typically our Hmong New Year celebration will be held at Woodbury High School from 1 to 5 o'clock. Always great activities, great performances, and just a wonderful opportunity to engage with their culture. And then finally, we have winter break coming up. It's really hard to believe. It feels like we just got done with Thanksgiving. But our students will go to school through Friday, December 20th. We will resume after Christmas on January 6th, 2025. Teachers and staff will be back on the 2nd for a workshop day, the 3rd for a READ Act training day, and then again, students coming back on January 6th. So to everybody, have a wonderful winter break.
Okay, thank you, Julie. 10.0 is future meeting dates. January 2nd, we will have a school board business meeting here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. And then immediately following that meeting, we will have a workshop meeting. And then on January 16th, we will have our school board business meeting at the district, here at the District Service Center at 6 p.m. 11.0 is a closed session for consideration of student expulsion. The next item on the agenda is the proposed expulsion of a student enrolled at South Washington County Schools. In order to consider the proposed expulsion, the board must review and discuss educational data regarding the student. The open meeting law, Minnesota statutes, section 13D.05, subdivision 2A3 states that any portion of a business meeting must be closed if educational data is discussed. Can I get a motion to move to closed session for the
So moved.
purpose of considering the proposed expulsion of a student?
So excited. So moved.
Second. There you go.
Moved by Simi, seconded by Ryan. I will comment that the board will come back for a vote after the closed session. Any other comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we are back. Can I get a motion to resume the public meeting?
Second.
Sharon, and who seconded? Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. We are back then. We will move on to 12.0, and that is an action on the resolution for student expulsion. At this time, I would like to remind the members of the school board that it is inappropriate to discuss any details regarding the incidents which gave rise to the proposed expulsion or any other data regarding the student proposed for expulsion. This data is private data under the Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. I will entertain a motion for consideration of the student expulsion.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Simi, seconded by Melinda. Any comments that don't actually mention anything? Okay, and this is a roll call vote.
Ryan Clark,
Yes.
Sharon Van Leer, Yes. Eric Tessmer,
Yes.
Melinda Doles,
Yes.
Pat Driscoll,
Yes.
Simi Pat Dank,
Yes.
and Katie Schwartz.
Yes. Okay, motion passes, and with that, we will move into 13.0, and we are adjourned.